Hello, everyone. I'm Conrad Colasso. And hello to Grief Dream researcher Joshua Black, host of the Grief Dreams podcast. Hello, Joshua.
Hi, thank you for having me today.
It's been about a couple years since we spoke last, long before COVID, and we were talking about your Grief Dreams research out of Brock University in St. Catharines, and a lot has changed since then. COVID has affected just about every aspect of our waking lives, and for more than a year. How do you see COVID-19 affecting our sleep?
Well, just when it comes to that, like research already has been shown that it's affecting it in the sense of it can provide us more time. So if we don't have to go to work or we don't have to commute for work, we get more time. And with that, a lot of people are dreaming a little bit more because they get that extra rest in. But also people are anxious and that also affects their sleep. So, it's probably roughly around the same, but it's really based on your stress level on if you're getting the best sleep possible these days. But with all the news and the anxieties and worries, that really affects how we sleep during the night.
Yeah, so people, it sounds like, are getting more sleep, but not necessarily a better sleep. Is that what you're seeing in your research?
Well, I don't actually research that, but that's what I've seen in other people's research as they move forward. And yeah, it makes sense in the sense that, if you are stressed, it's going to be harder to go to bed. So in that sense, people are going to be probably sleeping a little less. But for those people who get to sleep in, they're probably sleeping a little bit more. But the dreams, on average, people tend to remember those a little bit more often.
So, what kind of dreams are we seeing people having during this COVID-19 period?
So research is coming out, which is nice, from a lot of different places. But like one of the major themes is just about our emotional anxieties when it comes to COVID. So it could be how we're just afraid of COVID. So a lot of bugs or chasing people or monsters or tsunamis, stuff like that. People are having like nightmares on that end. And then, when it comes to the fears, people may be in a public place and no one has their mask on, or maybe they forgot their mask. So there's a lot of that anxiety going on, or even like financial worries. So you got to understand when it comes to looking at dreams, dreams reflect our waking life. And so whatever we're dealing with in our waking life will come through in our dreams in one way or another. And because a lot of it's going to be about worry and anxiety, that's going to creep in and we're going to have more of those types of dreams.
Are people dreaming about loved ones that they've lost in relation to COVID, either people who died from COVID or the people who they've lost sending them messages that they feel may be COVID related?
This is the beauty of these, I call them grief dreams, but the dreams of the deceased is that these dreams are different for the most part than our regular dreams that we normally have. Like we're normally having these nightmares and that's on the increase. But when it comes to these dreams, especially with the deceased in it, they tend to be more comforting and more positive, which technically goes against some of the dream research that we've shown prior. So, with that, there's a lot of amazing dreams that are helping people through a very difficult time, especially if they've lost someone within the period of the pandemic. Our grief support on how we can support those that we love have changed. And with that, there's going to be more complications. But what I love about these dreams is that they're still helping us in many ways work through that and even help us sort of maintain a decent well-being as we try to process grief in the pandemic, which I think is just a horrible situation in general. I never had to do that. And so I feel for those people who have to.
Yeah, I remember when we spoke last, I told you this wasn't too long after the death of my father. I told you about how my cousin had dreamt of my father and seeing him at the airport and how happy he was to be boarding a flight. And, that's something that gave comfort to my mom and me and my sister. What kinds of stories are you hearing now from people where they are receiving comfort from people that they've loved who've passed on in this time of stress?
So there's really these two types. So there's if the loss has happened in the pandemic versus if the loss has happened, before. But if we just go to the loss happened in the pandemic, you see very positive themes of just love. And that one theme of like there's a separation, they're moving, like that plane ride, you would still see those types of dreams now. It's because the whole point is about comforting the dreamer in one way or another. And so I had this dream come in where the individual had her grandmother die during the pandemic, and she was in the dream just crying on her mom's shoulder. And then all she saw her grandmother there, full white, and just providing, wasn't saying anything, but looking at her and just providing this love. And she said the love she felt was something she's never felt in waking life. And she can't really explain it, but it completely changed her understanding of what love is, but also just how amazing she felt waking up. And that can do so much as we try to process our grief, because usually we're just in this deep sorrow for a long state of time. But this gives us sort of a couple things. It provides us an emotional regulation that it's sometimes very hard to come by when we are grieving, but also these continuing bonds that we can feel with the deceased that has been shown to be effective after a loss. But the power of love in some of these dreams, it's just still remarkable, and how it's helping people work through this stuff.
So I want to say hello to everyone joining us on social media. As always, we're taking your questions and comments during this live discussion, so feel free to post or just say hello to Joshua Black. We have a comment that comes in from Locke on Instagram who says, I've had multiple dreams where I'd fall ill with COVID, as would family members and other people I know. And Michael on Twitter says, I've had a couple dreams that the pandemic was over and things were back to normal, and then was sad to wake up and remember that wasn't the case. Is that something you're coming across as well?
Yeah, you don't really see that with the deceased in the imagery. It's more based on your grief in a lot of ways. And so a lot of those other dreams are just based on our waking day anxieties and worry. So, of course, if you're worrying about catching COVID, well, you're probably gonna have more of these dreams where family does and you are. And then the other individuals dream where they felt that COVID was over. That's beautiful, because hopefully one day it will be. So maybe it's giving that individual a little bit hope for what the future holds. But also it's wish fulfillment too, because a lot of people are just really frustrated now, especially in Ontario with the third lockdown, on just be able to do what they normally would have done, especially in summer. And I want us to actually jump back to the last part we just talked about dreams of individuals whose deceased or their loved one died prior to the pandemic. Because what you see in those dreams is you don't get these nightmarish kind of images. What you're getting is these dreams with the deceased, so they may be dead maybe 10, 20 years, but they're comforting them within the pandemic. So they're providing them, they're asking them sometimes how they're doing, which I think is fascinating. They're providing them advice on maybe how to sort of work through this problem. And then other people are just spending more time. So I've have a bunch of people just say they're dreaming of the deceased more often. And for me, and they're positive dreams. And then for me, when I see that, it's like it's helping us make it through these difficult times. And that's the beauty of how these dreams can change over time. So if you're not in your deep sorrow anymore, these dreams tend to pop up again when we're challenged in life in many ways. And so it could be a divorce, it could be a pandemic, and then even at end of life, you see these dreams again help people as they die.
In advance of this interview, before when we announced that we were going to talk to you, we heard from a lot of people on social media who did say that they were dreaming more often and receiving that kind of support from loved ones who had passed on. So that seems to be true in some of the messages we've been getting from people on social media. What about children? Are children also dreaming quite often about the stress that they have been feeling over COVID? It's been a very difficult time for people under 18, as they've been unable to celebrate some of the milestones in their lives, whether it's graduations or other kinds of celebrations. What are we hearing about how children are dreaming at this time?
I
Joshua,
think Okay, there you
Okay.
go.
All right.
You froze
So,
there for a second.
oh,
So
okay.
yeah, when it comes to these children's dreams, they're having very similar nightmares, just as adults are, because they're also challenged in many ways. And the ways they used to find comfort in life, they can't anymore. Like playing with friends or going to friends or having birthdays that they can't celebrate with everyone. It's very difficult for them too. And they're also having these losses and they're having these dreams of the deceased. And it's just important to know that when we talk, we need to sort of really ask, really everyone, but children too, about the dreams they're having. It can provide a window into what they're actually dealing with in life. And when it comes to dreams of the deceased and after grief, you can get a window in how they're doing, because not all these dreams are positive. Most are, just through my research, a large percentage anyways. And most people will have, children and adults including, will have these dreams after loss of the deceased. And so, it's just about asking those questions. But these dreams can also be very beneficial, just as they are to adults, to help people work through some of their emotions, which I just find it's amazing because it's like everything's changing in our lives, but these dreams seem to be still doing the same thing.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that idea that some of these dreams are beneficial, but others are not. They can express a concern or um, express that the dreamer may be going through some mental anxiety, some stress for the events in their life that are related to COVID. What can these dreams tell us about our mental health as we deal with the loss of loved ones to the virus or the loss of the freedoms that we've enjoyed?
Well, I think that's the beauty of these dreams. Like at first, they don't seem like they're benefiting us because they're nightmarish, they're keeping us up. Maybe we'd be afraid to go to bed, so they're restricting our sleep. But if you actually can understand what these dreams are trying to do and how I sort of see a lot of these dreams, they're like our best friend that's telling us the truth about how we truly feel. And if we can actually listen to what they're telling us, we can actually do some work when we're awake and to really effectively tackle some of these problems, either seeking help when we need to. But a lot of times we just don't we think we're further than we are. We're handling our emotions better than we are. A lot of times we just avoid our emotions and we're not dealing with it. We're just pushing it down. And these dreams are saying, look, this is still here. It's still affecting you in a lot of ways that you don't realize. And so I sort of feel like it's trying to benefit us to sort of let's work through this so we don't get into a deeper state of negativity or depression or anxiety. Let's actually work through this. And you see, when it comes to these dreams of the deceased, people do have these negative dreams of them in many ways. Maybe they're dying again, or they're chasing them, or providing them, I guess, moments of more guilt or grief. And those are really related to high forms of trauma after loss and unresolved issues of guilt or blame. And so it's when you can understand that, then you can actually look at, okay, where can I get help? How can I understand this further as I move forward? And when it comes to these dreams of the deceased, it's very important to use discernment when understanding what these dreams mean, because a lot of people who are spiritual will take a negative dream as a basically haunting or as a negative visitation. And that is really concerning for me because they're complicating their grief even more so. And if we can give them more of an explanation on maybe why they're dreaming of that and how it relates to their waking life, well, then they can process that and work through those emotions a little easier, a little sooner than they would have before.
I want to say hello to Robin, who commented on social media. She says, dreams have definitely helped me cope with losing my grandma when I couldn't be physically near her. That's another thing that has been really challenging about this time. We've seen people pass on, not just from COVID, but from other causes, and loved ones can't celebrate or can't celebrate their life or mourn their loss in person. They've had to do it while being away from the people that they love. That's very stressful. And Robin says that the dreams, at the very least, have helped her through all of that. Gabriel on Twitter says, I've had several dreams, sometimes extremely distressing and sometimes confusing. Why is it important to talk about our grief dreams under COVID-19?
Well, I think it normalizes the experiences that most of us are having in the grief journey. When I started this research, no one was talking about the subject. And I think it's so important that we normalize this in any kind of session because there's a lot of rich information about how we're dealing with grief and what's actually helping us if those dreams are helping us. And so, for people, that's the biggest thing, is to just allow yourself to realize there's rich detail in that, and to really help us out. And I will actually mention too, there is something that I found in my research, and I found cross culturally too, in different ways. And it's a theme called "Come Join Me." And what it's about is where the deceased basically tries to drag you to the afterlife, or try to convince you to join them in the afterlife. So it can be a positive or negative dream. And what I found in my research is that there's individuals who had very high forms of trauma. A clinical psychologist noticed that these themes were related to suicide ideation. And another culture, indigenous culture, basically had a myth that if people have these dreams, they're going to die soon. And so it's all saying the same thing, that there's going to be those individuals who are having those types of themes. It should be a red flag and a high concern that there's a lot of mental health issues going on. And that's why it's important to ask about the dreams, and for clinicians and anyone who worked with the bereaved to start incorporating and asking about these dreams, because what I found in my research is most people won't share these dreams unless asked.
Well, we've got a few more people who are sharing their experiences and their dreams on social media. I'll go to Case, who says, I lost my brother and I constantly dream of him. I see it as a sign that he's visiting me. So that's very much like what you just described. And JC says, maybe I'm not understanding, but I have so many dreams of my late father. It's us traveling through the world together. Maybe this is a sign that life will be okay and this is only temporary. What would you say
Mm.
to JC about that?
That the travel, I think too, like, it's one of those things that if you're going to travel with someone, why not someone that you really miss and you care for? And the deceased is one of those people I would love to travel with too, like my father who died. And right now, it's when we can't travel, it's almost like a double thing. It's like you get to spend time with someone you love, plus you get to travel, which is something we can't really do right now. So you see those sort of how it can be beneficial, and just people are waking up, I would think, a little more comforted and a little more hopeful of what the future holds. And for those people who believe these dreams are visitations like the one prior, as long as it's a positive feeling, I don't see any concern with that. It's helping people work through their grief, and it's helping people maintain those bonds, and really help people with their faith and what they believe in the afterlife. And I think those are very positive qualities of these dreams, as long as people are using discernment and making sure that it's a comforting and it's not complicating their grief.
So, what advice do you have for someone who's trying to interpret a COVID-19 grief dream?
It's a big question, because everyone dreams are very unique to them. So everyone has their own dream language. So you can't really go online. You can't go buy a dream dictionary. You got to really understand your own dream language. And the best way that I suggest people to do that, if you're just starting out, is to look at your emotions in the dream, what's going on there, and then try to sort of pinpoint that in your waking life. And then that'll be so much easier to understand where those dreams are coming from. But if you are having difficulty, I do offer one-on-one grief dreams consulting to help people, because it is a challenge to understand a language that we've never taught in school. It's just something that has always been there, but no one really paid attention to or valued. And hopefully these conversations allow people to value their dreams a little bit more.
Thanks, Joshua. Before we go, we'll give the last word to Jody on social media, who says, it's become abnormal for me to not dream about the pandemic. I dream we've forgotten about COVID, and then we have a collective mutual moment of weight. Shouldn't we be distanced from each other and be wearing masks? Then we realize the weight and potential consequences of not taking the appropriate precautions. It's fear based with community at the core.
Mm.
Joshua, thanks very much for talking with all of us about this, and thanks for doing your research. Really a tough time for all of us, and it's a thing that affects us in every moment that we're awake, and increasingly, it seems, every moment that we're sleeping. So thank you very much for being a part of this conversation today.
Well, thank you for having me. And if anyone wants to know more information on the topic, they can visit my website, griefdreams.ca, and I'd be happy to answer any kind of questions people have.
All right. Thanks to everyone who participated in the live chat today with questions and comments. Thanks to producer Haley Zimak, Jamie Thomas, and the social media streaming team at the CBC in Toronto. We do one of these live chats every week. And if there's someone you want to hear from, let us know. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at CBC Hamilton. I'm Conrad Colasso. Thanks for watching.